Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Tes Amud Beis 9b of Masechus Megillah. We are starting 3 lines from the bottom of the page with the Mishnah. The Mishnah continues the series of Ein Bains, of all those things that are similar except for when they're different. So says the Mishnah, Ein Bain Shiloh Yerushalayim Ella. There's no difference between Shiloh and Yerushalayim except for the following. So Shiloh is the place where the Mishkan was originally erected after they entered Eretz Yisrael, it was almost like a more permanent Mishkan, and different than the Mishkans that we talked about last week, which were less permanent in other places in Israel. But when it was erected in Shiloh, it was lasting, and there's no difference between the Mishkan in Shiloh and the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, except for the following: Ela shebeshilo ochlin kachim kalem u'maiser sheni b'chol haroa. That when it came to Shiloh, you could eat kachim kalem and maiser sheni as long as you were in sight of the Mishkan. Kachim kalem are literally like lighter holy things, and what it means is that the halacha is that for karbanos such as a shlamim, a peace offering, a toda, which is a kind of shlamim, a thanks offering, and also the Karban Pesach, which is also a type of shlamim, they have to be within the walls of Yerushalayim, or within the walls of the city where the Beis HaMikdash is. Now, Shiloh was a replacement Beis HaMikdash, a temporary Beis HaMikdash. It didn't have walls around the city of Shiloh. So where were you allowed to eat kachim kalim? The answer is, says the Mishnah, as long as you were in sight of the Mishkan. Of Yerushalayim, lifnim minachol. Of Yerushalayim, you had to be inside the walls of Yerushalayim. You're not necessarily inside of the Beis HaMikdash. As long as you were within the walls, that was enough. Fine. So that's a difference that they had in terms of where you could eat kachim kalim, as well as meiser sheni. Meiser sheni is the tithe that you take during the 1st and 2nd year of Shemitah and the 4th and 5th year of Shemitah, where you take 1/10 of your produce and you bring it to Yerushalayim to consume it there. It has to be consumed in Yerushalayim or redeemed with the money, and then the money is brought to Yerushalayim. But to buy food, you have to eat the Meiser Sheni in Yerushalayim. And again, when it came to Shiloh, there were no walls, so what did it mean? Again, it's not in Yerushalayim, it's in the city where the temple is, so as long as you were in sight of the Mishkan, that was enough. It's not, the way Rashi says it is that you have to be able to see Shiloh, not necessarily the Mishkan. I assume Shiloh was not just the Mishkan, but had some kind of village around it. So it sounds like, at least according to Rashi, that you have to be within sight of Shiloh, not necessarily within sight of the Mishkan, possibly. I'm not sure. It could be Rashi is just using the word Shiloh to describe the Mishkan. So that's a little unclear. But with one in Yerushalayim, you have to be within the walls of Yerushalayim. Okay, now v'kan kache kachim ne'achalin lifnim min haklayim. Now, both when it came to the Mishkan in Shiloh and the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, when we're dealing with kache kachim, those need to be eaten within the walls or the curtains. In the case of the Mishkan, the walls of the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash itself. So kache kachim is the holy of holy karbanos offerings, and those, such as like a karban chatos eaten by the kohanim, so those would have to be eaten within the walls of the Beis HaMikdash, not just the walls of Yerushalayim, but the walls of the Beis HaMikdash. So there's no real difference when the Beis HaMikdash was within the walls of the Beis HaMikdash. When they had the Mishkan, it was within the curtains of the Mishkan. Fine, so that they're the same. Kedusha Shiloh, yesh acharei heter. The holiness of Shiloh, it has permission afterwards. Meaning, actually relating to what we learned last week, that during the time that Shiloh was built, and they had the Mizbeach set up there, you were not allowed to make your own personal Mizbeach, your own personal Bama. But after Shiloh was destroyed, and before the Beis HaMikdash was built, that was a time of Heter HaBamos. That was a time that you were allowed to make your own Bama. So, the Kedusha, the holiness of Shiloh, following it, during that time you couldn't build a bama, but afterwards, afterwards it was permissible. Ukedushas Yerushalayim, but the holiness of Yerushalayim, the Beis Hamikdash, once the Beis Hamikdash was built, you can no longer ever build your own Mizbeach. Even after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, you were only allowed to bring karbanos in the place of the Mizbeach itself of the Beis Hamikdash. The Rashi quotes the pasuk from which we learn this. The pasuk says that now you're allowed to bring your own karbanos because kilo vasem adata, because you have not yet come el hamenucha ve'el hanachla, to the menucha, the resting place, ve'el hanachla, the inheritance. What does that mean? So the resting place is Shiloh, this temporary place, and the nachla, the inheritance, is the Beis Hamikdash. You haven't yet come to Shiloh, and you haven't yet come to the Beis Hamikdash, so therefore you're allowed to build your own bama in the desert, and Rashi quotes the Gemara in Tzvachim that says that the pasuk divides them up into two to show that in between though you're allowed to. You haven't yet come to Shiloh, and then you haven't yet come to the Beis Hamikdash, but in between those you would be allowed to build your own bama. Fine, so that's the source that Shiloh. After Shiloh is destroyed, you are allowed to build a bama. After your own personal mizbeach, after the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, once the Beis Hamikdash is built, and even after it's destroyed, there's no heter of bama, so you're not allowed to build your own bama. Okay, says the Gemara, top of Yud Amad Aleph, the second line, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak says, Shamati shemakrivim bebeis chonav bizman hazeh. I heard that one can bring karbanos in Beis Chonav nowadays. Beis Chonav was an altar that was built by the son of Shimon HaTzadik, the first Kohen Gadol of the second Beis Hamikdash, and he built a altar in Egypt, and Rabbi Yitzchak says, I heard that you're allowed to bring karbanos on that altar, even though this is after the Beis Hamikdash has been built. The first Beis Hamikdash is built. The second Beis Hamikdash has been built too. But that's and now Rabbi Yitzchak is during the time of the Amoraim. There's no Beis Hamikdash anymore. He says, I heard you're allowed to bring a karban there. Kasavar. Now he held two things that would fit into that. Number one, Beis Chonav la Beis Avodah Zarahi. First of all, he held that Beis Chonav, this place, was not an altar for idolatry, it was an altar for Hashem, because that seemed to be a dispute, what that was built for. So number one, it was meant, L'Shem Shamayim, for the sake of heaven, as an altar for Hashem. V'kasavar, and he also holds, Kedusha Rishona Kidsha L'Shaita V'lo Kidsha L'Asi B'Avo, that the original sanctification of the Beis Hamikdash was only l'shaita, was only for its time when the Beis Hamikdash stood. So then that was sanctifying. You're not allowed to build your own bama, but it was not sanctified forever. What's the source to say that? Dichsiv, because the pasuk says, the pasuk I just mentioned before, Ki lo vasem adata, you have not yet come el hamenucha vel hanachala. You have not yet come to the place of resting, the menucha vel hanachala, and the place of inheritance. Menucha zu Shiloh. Menucha refers to you have not yet come to Shiloh, so that's why you're allowed to build a bama. It says, and Nachal azu Yerushalayim, and you have not yet come to Yerushalayim, to the place of inheritance. Now Makish Nachal ala Menucha. We compare, because they're juxtaposed, we compare Nachal to Menucha. We compare Yerushalayim to Shiloh. Ma Menucha yesh acharahet. Or just like Menucha, just like Shiloh, we said that after it's destroyed, one is allowed to build a bama. So too, we compare that Nachla, meaning Yerushalayim, after it's destroyed, you're allowed to build a bama. And that would be the source that you'd be allowed to bring karbanos in Beis Chonav. And holding that the Kedusha, the holiness of Yerushalayim, is only temporary. So Amrulei, they said to him after Yitzchak said this, Amarta, do you say this? I guess he had said Shamati, I heard that they say. And they said, do you say this? Amar lahu lo. He said, no, I don't agree. Amar Rava said, Ha'elokim. He said, he swore, by God, Amra, you said it, he said it, V'gamirna lamining, I learned it from him. Originally, Rabbi Yitzchak did say it, he says, and I learned it from him, but he's now retracting. Umay taimakam hadarbe. Why did he retract? So Mishum Kashya de Rav Mari, because the contradiction that Rav Mari raised from our Mishnah and from another Mishnah. Demosiv Rav Mari, because Rav Mari asked a contradiction, because it says in our Mishnah, Kedusha Shiloh Yesh Acharei Hater, that Shiloh has permission afterwards to build Bamos after Shiloh is destroyed, but Kedusha Yerushalayim Ein Acharei Hater. But Yerushalayim does not have permission afterwards. So our Mishnah contradicts this teaching of Rabbi Yitzchak, and that's why he took it back. Again, Rabbi Yitzchak said that you're allowed to bring karbanos in Beis Chonav, even after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and holding, based on a hekesh that he learned, that the kedusha of Yerushalayim was temporary, but the Mishnah says otherwise. The Mishnah says it's permanent. Ve'otnan, we have another Mishnah. Another Mishnah says, Mishabal Yerushalayim Nesru Habamos. Once we came to Yerushalayim, Bamos, personal altars, became forbidden. V'lo haya lahem od heter. And there was no permission afterwards. V'hi haisal anachla. It became an inheritance that and remains holy, the place of the Beis Hamikdash. And you're not allowed to bring karbanos outside of the place of the Beis Hamikdash. Fine. So this contradicts Rabbi Yitzchak's teaching and makes it clear that no, the kedusha of Yerushalayim was lasting. Says the Gemara, it's not so simple. Tanaihi. Now, really, it's a machlokas tanaim. It's true. Our Mishnah and the Mishnah we just quoted, which I think is in Zvachim, are clear that the kedusha of Yerushalayim, of the Beis Hamikdash, remains, and it remains holy, and you're not allowed to build your own personal bama. But we have a contradiction to that. It's really a machlokas, a dispute between Tanaim. Ditnan, as we learned Ditnan, we learned in a Mishnah the following. Amar Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says, Shamati, this is a Mishnah in Adios. Shamati, I heard, again with this, again that fits into Adios. Adios is testimonies. So, Shamati, I heard, Kishahayu boning behechal, when they built the second Beis Hamikdash, so what they did was, they wanted to start bringing karbanos right away. So, Osin kilayim lahechal, ukilayim laazara. They put up curtains. Again, they're building a permanent Beis Hamikdash, but they put up curtains around the heichal. The heichal is the actual Beis Hamikdash part, the main section where you have the heichal is the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKadashim. That's where all the special vessels of the Beis Hamikdash are. So they put up curtains for the heichal. Uklayim lazar, and klayim, curtains for the azara, for the courtyard, which is where the big mizbeach was. Fine. Ella, except there was a difference. Shebeheichal bonin mibachutz, ubazara bonin mibifnim. Difference is that the builders, when it came to the heichal, they were outside the curtains, and when it came to the azara, the courtyard, they were inside the curtains. So, because they couldn't, the workers not allowed to go into the heichal, so they put curtains around and they built the wall around it, and they stay outside the curtains. When it came to the azara, the courtyards, they were allowed in the courtyard. So there, they put the curtains around the courtyard, and they built the wall inside. Okay, so that's what Rabbi Eliezer says, and he says they put up these curtains. Why did they put up these curtains? So it's not so clear, but the Gemara's having, what the Gemara at least thinks right now, is that they put up the curtains because without the curtains, you can't eat your karbanos there. Like we said, you need to eat kadshe kachim, to eat the carbon chatas and stuff. You need to be within the curtains. So seemingly that's why they put up curtains. Now, Sorry, actually Rashi says something slightly different. Rashi says that in order to bring karbanos, it has to be Pesach el Hamoed, by the entrance to the tent. And in order to be by the entrance to the tent, you need a tent. You need walls. So in order to bring karbanos, they needed walls. That's why they put up these curtains. That's at least the havning, and that's what we think at this point is the reason they put up the curtains. Then the Gemara continues to quote the Mishnah. It says, "Ve'amar Rabbi Yoshua," and Rabbi Yoshua said, "Shamati shemakrivin afapi she'eng bayis." I heard that no, you could bring karbanos even without the Beis Hamikdash. Ochin kadshe kadshim afapi she'eng kalim, and you could eat kadshe kadshim. You could eat these karbanos even without the curtains. And kachim kalam meiser sheni afapi she'eng choma. And you could eat the kachim kalam, the meat of the karbanos of karban shlamim, which could be eaten has to be eaten in Yerushalayim, but could be eaten outside the Beis Hamikdash. And meiser sheni also needs to be eaten in Yerushalayim. Those could be eaten af b'shein choma, even though there's no wall around Yerushalayim. Why? Because the original sanctification of Yerushalayim was for its time, but was also forever lasting after that. So therefore, the Beis Hamikdash is the Beis Hamikdash. It's holy. You don't need the walls to make it the Beis Hamikdash. And therefore you can bring a carbon even without walls for the Beis Hamikdash. And you can eat kachim within that area, even without the actual walls. And Yerushalayim also maintains its holiness. And you can eat kachim kalim. You can eat those karbanos that have to be in Yerushalayim, even without a wall around Yerushalayim. You can eat meiser sheni, even without a wall around Yerushalayim, because the kedusha, the holiness that it was sanctified with, remains. That's what Rabbi Yoshua says. Now, Michlal, the implication is to Rabbi Eliezer Savar, that Rabbi Eliezer, the first opinion, said, no, they put up the curtains when they were building the Beis Hamikdash. Savar lo kitchel asu. He held that it wasn't sanctified forever. Otherwise, why do they need the curtains when they rebuilt the Beis Hamikdash? The holiness is still there from when it was originally there. So it seems that Rabbi Eliezer was saying, no, there's no holiness here. You have to put up the Beis Hamikdash to be now considered a Beis Hamikdash, to be Pesach el Hamoed, to be within the walls. You need to put up new walls to establish a new Beis Hamikdash, to establish new holiness. So it seems we have a machlokas Tanaim. We have a dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Eliezer holds that the Kedusha was only temporary, and by that token, you would also be allowed to build bamos, personal altars, after the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed. And Rabbi Yeshua says, no, the Kedusha is permanent, and you're not allowed to build altars, and also you don't need to put up the walls in order to be able to do the temple service, and to eat the karbanos. So says the Gemara, not necessarily. Amrli Ravina Ravashi, Ravina said to Ravashi, Mimai, how do you know that that's what they're arguing about? Dilma, Dekuliyama, Kedusha, Rishona, Kid Shalashai, Devikid Shalasablavo. Maybe everybody agrees that the Kedusha is permanent. And really, in order to be able to bring the karbanos, you don't need to put up any walls, even according to Rabbi Eliezer. Umar, Maidashmiya Lekamar, Umar, Maidashmiya Lekamar. And each of them was just reporting what they had heard in terms of what happened and what you can do. Meaning, Rabbi Eliezer said, I heard they put up the curtains first. He didn't say why. And Rabbi Yeshua said, I heard that you're allowed to bring karbanos, even without the Beis Hamikdash. So, at least in the place of the Beis Hamikdash, but even if it's not rebuilt. So they were just saying what they heard. V'chitema kolayim l'Rabbi Eliezer lamli. Now you'll say, but why would they put up the curtains? According Rabbi Eliezer said they put up the curtains first. Why? If they don't need them to bring karbanos, so just wait till the way that we assumed was that they wanted to start bringing karbanos right away before the walls were built, so they just put up temporary curtains. But if you don't need them, so then why did they put up curtains? So it says, let's Yusa Ba'alma. No, they just did it for privacy, in order to keep peering eyes out, but not because they had a halachic requirement that you need those walls to be able to bring karbanos. Because even Rabbi Eliezer could agree that the kedusha remains there, and you're allowed to bring karbanos there, and you're allowed to eat the karbanos there, even without these curtains. So, according to this, we do not have a machlokas Tanaim. We don't have a source that there's a dispute between Tanaim regarding whether the holiness of Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash remained forever or not. Ella, so rather Kihani Tanai. But we could say it's like the following Tanaim. Here we can have a source that there is a machlokas Tanaim about this. Did Tanya, because we're learning a brisa. Amar Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi said, Lama manu chachamim es elu. Why did the chachamim specifically list these? What's he referring to? So he's referring to a Mishnah in Maseches Arachin, and over there the Mishnah lists 9 cities that were walled from the days of Yoshua ben Nun, and would have the halachos of Batei Arichoma, of a walled city. That that if you sell a house within a walled city, so you have like a year to buy it back, and if you don't, then it's completely sold. So we have to know what's a walled city, and it goes by if it was walled from the days of Yoshua ben Nun, apparently. So they list in the Mishnah in Erechim 9 cities. So our Gemara says that Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yossi says, why did they count those? Why did they list those? Because when the Jews of the diaspora came back up to Israel, following, during, I guess, times of Ezra, when they were rebuilding the second Beis HaMikdash, or rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash, building the second Beis HaMikdash, Matzu es Egu, they found these cities that were walled, Vikidshum, and they sanctified them to be considered walled cities. Aval harishonos batlu mishebatla haaretz. But the original walled cities were batal, they were no longer considered walled once the land was nullified, was destroyed. So he's saying that when it comes to walled cities, how do we determine what's a walled city? Not from when they originally entered the land of Yoshua ben Nun, because that was nullified. Once the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, that's all in the past. Rather, what's important is what was a walled city when they came back to Eretz Yisrael, because it was a new kedusha, a new holiness. Right? Alma, we see Kasavar that he holds kedusha rishona kidsha l'shaita v'lo kidsha l'asiblava, that the sanctification of Eretz Yisrael was only for its time and was not permanent, and that's why we're deciding what's a walled city not by what was walled from the days of Yoshua ben Nun, but rather from what was walled when the people came out of Galus, came out of Babylonia and Persia, and came back to Eretz Yisrael. That's one opinion. Viraminu, but we ask a contradiction on that, because we have another brisa. It quotes the same person, Amar Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi says, and here he says the opposite. He says, V'chi elu bilvad hayu? Were these the only walled cities that the Chachamim list 9 cities in the Mishnah? He says, were these the only cities? But it says in the pasuk, Shishim ir kol chav al argov, that there were 60 cities all along the rope of the strip of Argov. Uksiv, and it says kol ela arim betzuros choma. They were all fortified with walls, gavoa, tall walls. So there were at least 60 walled cities when it says Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi. There weren't just 9 cities. When they came into Eretz Yisrael, there were at least 60 cities. So lama manu chachamim es elu? So why did the chachamim only list these 9? Shekisha'alu b'nei Agola, because when they came out of Galus, they came out of the diaspora, they came out of Babylonia and Persia. Matzu elu, they found these vikidshum, and they sanctified them. Now the Gemara interjects, kidshum, what do you mean they sanctified them? Hashta ha'amri lo tzricha l'ktushi. The same brisa says that, if you keep reading it, it says you don't need to sanctify them. It says that, as we're about to see, as if you keep reading, so you have to change up this word. Ela matzu es elu umanum. What it means is they found them and they listed them. And then this is the end of the brayso. Says v'lo elu bilvad, not just these ones. Ela kol shetale lecha masares biyadecha me'avosecha. Any city that you have a masares, you have a tradition in your hands from your forefathers. Shemukefes cholam mimos Yoshua ben Nun, that it was surrounded by a wall from the days of Yoshua ben Nun. Kol mitzvos halalu noagim ba. All of these mitzvos apply to it, meaning all the mitzvos of walled cities will apply to it. Also, by the way, I'm reading the Megillah on the 15th, and some other things that are relevant to walled cities. So all of the mitzvos, all of the halachos of walled cities apply to them if they were walled from the days of Yoshua ben Nun. Because the original sanctification was not only for its time, but was also forever. So here he's saying, that's a little bit of a different point, but it's talking about Eretz Yisrael in terms of the walled cities. But he's saying that that there were many walled cities from the days of Yoshua ben Nun. That's what matters. Why did the Chachamim list just 9? Because those 9 they found, when they came from Bavel, they found these 9 walled cities, and they listed them that you should know these have been walled since the days of Yoshua ben Nun. But it's not just these. Any city that you have a tradition that gets walled from the days of Yoshua ben Nun is considered a walled city for all the relevant halachos. So we have 2 versions of Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, and one, he seems to hold that the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael was temporary, and we decide a walled city not by what was walled from the days of Yoshua ben Nun, but from when they came back from the diaspora. And the second one, he's saying it goes by the original sanctification of the land, and that was permanent. So, Kashya Rabbi Shmuel ad Rabbi Shmuel, we have a contradiction within Rabbi Shmuel. So the answer would be, Trei Tanai Aliba Rabbi Shmuel Reg, it's 2 Tanaim with 2 different traditions from Rabbi Shmuel, as to what he said. Aliba Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi. Vibai Sema, or alternatively, you can say, Har Rabbi Lazar Bar Yossi. It's not Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, it's Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Yossi. One of them. Amra. Ditanya, because it would fit in with what he says, because we have a brayso that says, Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Yossi Amar, Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Yossi says, Asher lo choma. The pasuk says that this is again within the laws of the walled cities, the houses within the walled cities, that if you sell a house in a walled city and a year passes, then the sale is permanent. But it says Asher ba'ir, Asher lo chama. That's in a city, Asher lo chama, that it has a wall. But the word lo is spelled with an extra aleph, which means it doesn't have a wall. So it doesn't have a wall, it does have a wall. It's trying to say it does have a wall. So why does it say it as if it doesn't have a wall? So what it teaches you is afal pi she'ein lo achshav, v'haya lo kodem lochem. That even if it doesn't have a wall now, but it had a wall before, so that's considered that it has a wall. So Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Yossi is saying that even though it's been destroyed, it doesn't matter. It keeps its status. And this would be, we're suggesting is, I guess, the second version of the brayso, so it would be Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Yossi. He's the one who's saying that it was that the kedusha, the sanctification, remains, and if the walled city was a walled city in the days of Yoshua ben Nun, when they sanctified the land, so it remains to be considered a walled city, even if it's no longer walled, even if it's destroyed. And so too with the Beis HaMikdash, that the Beis HaMikdash, once it was sanctified, it was Kitshel Hashaita, it was sanctified for its time, and was Kitshel Asav Lavo, and it remained sanctified forever, and that fits with, that would be along the lines of our Mishnah as well, but we're suggesting that it's actually a Machlokas Tanaim, because the other version, the first brayso here of Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, is saying with regards to walled cities, that it was not a permanent Kedusha, and the Gemara is suggesting that that he would view things the same with regards to Yerushalayim, that just like the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael was temporary in terms of what's considered a walled city, so too the Kedusha of Yerushalayim and the Beis HaMikdash was temporary. While it was there, it was hukdash, it was sanctified. Once it was destroyed, according to their opinion, it was no longer sanctified. Okay, we'll stop there.